This is James Marshall. Do not persist. I repeat, do not persist. We have slipped the deteriorating bonds of this omnipresent reality to touch the face of God.
It all started on a night like any other. During a hot night of summer, people were out having fun with their friends or passing time with their loved ones. Then it started happening. A bright light in the sky made the night look like it was noon. And then, people changed. Not all of them, just some. Some appeared more pallid, grew fangs and started feeding from other people. Some growled and got covered in fur. Their jaws grew and started killing other beings. Some shone an aura of magic around them and started attacking each other. Most of them were screaming about the veil. I was there. I knew. I must explain myself. Every weird occurrence in this world is true. Every horror story featuring demons, angels, vampires, werewolves, fairies, ghosts. They're all real, but most people just can't see them. We, hid in plain sight, mostly thanks to the veil. It was something mages used to cloak us from humans. The stories that came from the past, when we roamed the earth with little to no caution, depending on how stupid some of us were cautionary tales to humans about us. So a council of mages, known as the Technocracy, decided to shroud every supernatural entity with it. Some decided that we wanted to continue to be with the humans and learn to generate a human vessel to be able to interact with them. Others decided that they could hide in old houses or forests, and others removed themselves from within the plane of existence of the humans. We were as happy as we could be. Some of us even decided to live most of our life in this plane, taking account of the aging process of normal human beings. So we changed our vessels with frequency. We all knew the day would come when the veil would fall. We just didn't think it would be so soon. When it all started, humans were at their peak, outnumbering us on a 100,000 to 1 ratio. In the first few nights, between the heart attacks, the victims of my feeding brothers, and the ones that went mad watching all of this fairy tale monsters for real, the ratio dropped 10,000 to 1. Humans started fighting back. They sure as hell wouldn't go down without a fight, and we knew that. At least I did. Outnumbered, we suffered losses, and that gave them the strength of spirit to keep fighting. Orders of hunters started reappearing out of the blue, where they hid for millennia. Now they could fight us again in the open. The ratio kept dropping in the first few months, going down to 1,000 to 1. The first powers started to worry. The fight for the soul of mankind was killing more than some of them wanted. So they stepped in. Angels came down from heaven to join the holy battle from those on the side of the light. Demons came up from hell to take part with those on the side of darkness. And reapers came from down under to pick every soul they could. The battleground changed entirely, and the problem started. The 15 pillars, the redeemers of this world, had not shown up yet. The warriors of destiny have not yet fought. And hunger is starting to give more souls to the reapers. I'm spacing out. Sorry about that. Thing is, when the first powers of the universe, also known as God, the devil, and the king of the underworld, decided to see what would become of humans in the long run, by influence, not by intervention, they decided there should be a fail-safe, to keep humans alive, despite all the conflict that could happen. So they created the Pillars, 15 special souls that should keep humanity alive. Of them, the Specials took 2 to keep us alive as well. But it seems that someone decided to change that part of our deal, and I'm worried about the future of our race. I believe that this killing should end up soon, that this plague, as humans called it, ends, so we can carry on. Whoever finds this must know that the plague is a cover-up, that this battle has been gearing up for years, and it may not be the end of it. I write this as I crave for another drop of blood. Hell, I would drain a cow to satisfy my thirst at this point, but there are none. Maybe I'm the one that's wrong. Maybe this is not the battle, but merely a skirmish to balance out powers. But it feels like the end of days. Carlos McCallan. This letter was found in a monastery in the Carpathian Mountains, buried deep underground, in a case that also contained a vial of blood. This vial has been analyzed, and the blood seemed partially human, and had traces of bacteria that caused so many deaths, known as Black Death. This researcher wonders if this is the writings of a madman, high in fever and almost dead at the time of writing, or if something else wrote it. I'm sorry this has taken so long. It's been an arduous process to get financial support for my research, as you might think. It's not easy to convince universities of importance of researching what looks like the writings of a madman near death during the Black Plague, and the utter importance of his words, especially since he talks about so many fabled creatures. Everyone thought I lost it or was somehow affected by a trace of the plague. But I'm not crazy, as the Pentex Corporation is not crazy either. They requested me to complete the research, as they thought I was attuned to the story. Now I have a huge research grant, access to a huge database of arcane information, and tons of time to dedicate to this research. As I said before, I still don't know if this would be just a wild goose chase. If these are, in fact, just the writings of a madman, the Pentex Corporation is not going to be happy about it. But let's cut to the chase. Let's go to what I have found about this Carlos McCallan character so far. And man, I feel like I'm losing my mind as I go through his story. I promise you, what you're about to hear in this report is just the truth, and nothing but the truth, according to my findings. Let's go back in time to around 800 AD, in the Norwegian region, surrounded by the German Sea. The McCallan homestead is not mentioned in any historical record, except some really old and very local documents, because of the rise to fame as a feared pirate captain of the youngest child. Carlos was the child who had to endure the most harsh conditions, as his parents were old by the time he was born, and by the life expectancy standards of the time, they couldn't support him further, so they gave him away as a fisherman's apprentice. The document says he was very badly treated by his master and was in fish cleaning duty, without much to eat during his early years. By the time he was a teenager, he had endured so much, his mind was that of an adult, eager for knowledge and adventure. He took his little free time to try and learn as much as he could, and try to get away from his menial life. He started getting the attention of an elderly erudite, Luthieli, and his apprentice, Alastair. He was educated in the language of the time, and learned to read and write. However, seeing the erudite was pretty much a hermit, and having adventure in his heart, he started to drift apart from them. At the moment, piracy was not a huge force to be reckoned with, but had a huge share of adepts due to the harsh economic conditions. A pirate boat had been using this town as the main port, and Carlos decided then to join their ranks, much to the dismay of Alastair, who kept repeating that they were savage vampires, and he should not try to earn fame and fortune, but to help keep the balance in the world with the knowledge the erudites provided. This, of course, did not feel appropriate for Karl's, whose desire of adventure and fortune took the best of him, leaving in their boats as they left port. This is the part where it gets hazy, as much of the information has been compiled from different local sources around the German Ocean, but he fought hard to earn the captain's recognition and go up in the ranks. He was treated badly by his crewmen, but he had learned to endure such treatment in his early years. Eventually, a mutiny started, and he saw his chance to prove the captain, whom he respected very much, his loyalty and valor, fighting alongside him and his few loyal men. When the smoke cleared, he was given the second mate rank, and the captain started grooming him to be a more important part of the crew. Now, and as fictional as it sounds, according to the records, the captain was actually a vampire and saw the potential for carnage on this young man, and decided to take advantage of that. He started to train him on naval combat, maritime boarding combat, and the young man took it, becoming more bloodthirsty as the time passed. By the time he was 25, he was first mate and a ghoul for his vampire lord. Around this time, the captain decided it was time for him to sire this bloodthirsty killing machine he created into a new vampire. He became second in command, and both ruled the ship with an iron fist, gaining fame as fearsome pirates, bloodthirsty and remorseless. Several attempts to sink them or kill them were unsuccessful, and eventually, around 8 to 10 years later, they parted ways, and Carlos decided to get his own ship and his own crew and sail the ocean. By the time he became a captain, he became even more ruthless. But as they say, nothing melts a frozen heart like the raging fire of love. He fell in love with Elena, the daughter of a Celtic erudite, and eventually he took her into her ship. But even though he was in love, his bloodthirsty ways were never sated, and Elena started to grow scared of the man she loved, and disguised by the horrible acts she saw every day on his ship. At this point in history, I definitely started understanding some more of the lore they used to refer to people back then, as this erudites seem more like mages or sorcerers than scholars. This is because this Elena, this daughter of erudites, decided to accomplish what many have tried before, and rid the world of this evil at hand, summoning a storm and sinking him and his crew for good, even if this meant for herself to be sacrificed as well. The storm created a huge maelstrom that started sinking the ship, and Carlos, feeling betrayed as he saw Elena conjuring this storm to send him to his demise, killed her. But it was too late for them, and even though he fought the wheel, trying to save his ship and his crew, the ship sank to the bottom of the darkened and ferocious ocean. I know what you're thinking. If all this happened around 800 to 850 AD, and he was sunk in the ocean, how come the name was used almost 500 years later? I had the same questions, and this battled me for some time. This is the part where my benefactor's arcane documents came to my aid. Do you remember he talked about the veil and the vessels? Around the time the veil was implemented, 1900s to 1950 AD, according to documents, he was long gone from this world, but not from the other one. See, quantum mechanics and string theory have it right. I know, particle physics doesn't seem to play much of a role in the story about vampires and mages and fabled creatures, but bear with me for a moment. Quantum physics state that there can be actions reflected in several places of the space-time at the same moment, due to quantum entanglement, and string theory states that there are several universes. Do you know how it all comes together? The multiple universes theory states that even though gravity is the most important force of the universe, it can also be the weakest, because it is the easiest one to circumvent. There's a theory that states that this is due to the fact that the force of gravity is being shared among all of the universes. Remember quantum entanglement. If one force of the universe is being shared amongst all the universes, what can impede that other energies have found a way to be shared amongst them all? I believe that mages have talked about This technocrants found a way to send the conscious mind of every one of these fabled creatures and creature replicas in a parallel universe, one only they could access or inhabit. This effectively served two purposes. One, protect themselves from the hunter's orders Carvos talked about. And two, protect the humans from the most destructive species. I assume vampires, werewolves, dragons, etc. Now, let's go back to our findings and merge it all together. Even though he had a human body, he was also a vampire. Vampires from myth are really hard to destroy, except by fire, sunlight, or holy weapons. If he was at the bottom of the ocean, he was pretty much protected from these things. But I suppose in constant agony as the depths of the ocean kept crushing him as fast as he could recover. Now, by the moment the mages created the veil, as he was pretty much still kicking, then he should have been sent there as well. That would explain my findings, as the next contact in the story of Carvos comes around the year 1020 AD. He kept using the same name and basically the same profession as his previous life. How could I know that this is not just a copycat pirate, taking advantage of the name Carvos made for himself before? Because his assault methods were exactly the same, and the oral stories tend to traverse things in the long run. Plus, this was almost 200 years ago, and it would seem too much of a coincidence to have two people with the same name, one of them as his given name, and the other one as the name this boy adopted around 16, when he joined a pirate crew. This exact same situation got repeated in 130 AD, 1210 AD, and 1300 AD. A boy around 16 would take on the name and becomes the ruthless, fearless pirate, using the same methods as the first Carvos. But it was all about to change around 1400 AD. I know I drifted apart from the scientific explanation I'm trying to find here for this to make sense. What makes you, as a person, be who you are? Energy. What religion has dubbed as soul is actually just electrical impulses in your brain. We're back into quantum physics territory, as the law of conservation of energy states that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, only transformed. When the embryo is in the 8th week of formation, the brain kickstarts, getting the energy needed to start higher functions as it continues its development. Since energy can neither be created nor destroyed, this energy has to come from somewhere, and needs to go somewhere else when the body dies. This basically means every human body could be a potential vessel to be inhabited by these fabled creatures. Since most of them had a human body to begin with, either vampires, werewolves, and mages share this trait, it could be easy for them to accommodate to a new body. But I think the fact that the higher brain development is done through the infancy. By the time the body reaches puberty, this outside energy starts to write the memories and traits to get accustomed to the new body, before the brain development ends around the 18th to 21st year of life. Of course, being in a human body, it means that all the fabled abilities these beings have are not available to them. But could it be possible that if the veil falls down, these vessels could be somehow infected or transformed into what the energy owner is on the other side? That would explain why he said that people started to transform, and this would also explain why the name has been reused several times, as they are dependent on the lifespan of a normal human, not their own bodies. The weird part is that these bodies, these vessels, get all the information from the previous lives, as well as access to the other side, the parallel universe these beings inhabit. And I don't think this would be with their physical bodies. I believe they might be doing this with astral projections. So many people claim to be able to do this, and this has been in human history for so long. I believe they are able to send their conscious mind there, as it is being shared between the two universes, and decide to live part of their lives here, and the rest on the other side. I'm starting to understand why the Pentax Corporation wants my research so badly. Searching through their database, I can see that they are composed of people that believe this is real, and are prepared to hunt these beings down, if they haven't done so already. I think I'm working for one of those hunters' orders Carvos was talking about, and I don't know how to feel about this. because I would be so interested to see if there is an actual scientific explanation for all of this, and if what I have discovered actually holds true, instead of just disposing of what they think might be a menace to the human race. I think this is it. I'm going to cut ties with the Pentex Corporation for good. Now that the Trace program has already copied the arcane documents database, at least what has been digitalized, and I'm giving this information to you, just in case they decide to hunt me down. I think I was as sneaky as I could be, but I think they're going to find out about this information I took from them, and it's not going to be pretty for me. Okay, so far nothing has happened to me, except I found a lot of additional information about the way they move from plane to plane, and from body to body. Don't worry, as they are unable to use just any body, they are not body snatchers. Apparently, there are some rules for that, but let's go back to my findings regarding the story of Carlvos McCallan. Around 1400 AD, there is a change on his story, and I think something major has to have changed in Carlvos' mind. For his next life, he decided to use all the knowledge he had gathered from his lives on the sea, and decided to try to go for the gold by getting control of a feud. So he went to a feud court, and worked for the feud lord as court counselor, helping create tactics to use against rival lords and acquire their territory. I suppose this could qualify as a different focus for the piracy he learns to do in his previous lives, eventually leading to his demise. He fell in love with a court sage named Emily, and decided the best way to get her just for him was to stage a coup of the feud, and take the feudal lord title for himself. But it went badly, as the sage learned all the savage tactics. He had been instructing the knights of her lord to take over other territories were going to be applied to her own lord, and advised the lord to cast him out as a traitor because she loved him and didn't want to see him dead. But the feudal lord did not take well to this betrayal, and decided to burn him at the stake, and the sage with him, because he was convinced she had helped him and only ratted him out because she thought she might be discovered. They were burned at the stake in front of all the townspeople, and he swore revenge against all those who crossed him just before dying. The next life he got was the one where he wrote this letter I shared at the beginning, but it had some disturbing implications according to what I have understood about it so far. He kept trying to get himself a royal title as a feudal lord, with sneakier tactics this time, but he was discovered and casted out, and eventually ended up living in a little hut in the forest, plotting a way to get back at the feudal lord who casted him out. However, as it tends to happen when people feel betrayed, he was so angry he started making mistakes, passing over people he shouldn't have. Near where he lived, there was a gypsy camp, and the memories of all these mages he felt betrayed from made him attack said camp. What he didn't expect was for a gypsy shaman to be guarding the camp, and she trapped him. He was absolutely sure they were going to kill him, as they kept shouting they captured a vampire. But the shaman had a different idea. Despite this sounding like a TV show plot, the shaman decided to curse him. My research has shown me that vampires have a way to control themselves partially. They call this duality humanity and the beast. The more humanity they have, the more suave and less prone to violence they are. They get tortured as well by the images of what the beast has done. Usually they try to balance it out, and many only succumb to the beast when their thirst takes the best of them. But his brutal ways were a sign that the beast had more power over him than the humanity. So, as a curse, this gypsy restored as much humanity as she could, and forced him to watch all the brutality and carnage inflicted by him to all of his victims. He started to go mad, watching all the terror and despair he had left on his path, and his mind was partially fractured, with the beast reduced to a shadow of his former self. Some documents state that this was not a random occurrence, that this punishment was not inflicted because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, but that either a prince from the Vampire Society decided to inflict this punishment as a way to get their cover-up and not draw so much attention to vampires, or by a mage from a coven to make him understand why Elena sunk him in the ocean because of all the horrors she had seen him cause to everyone around him, herself included. Then, and unfortunately for him, the Black Plague started ravaging Europe, causing more horrors and despair for him to watch. And he went absolutely mad. But I have my own theory. I believe his madness was just a side effect of what the curse did to him. As he was engulfed in these horrors, he started to see glimpses of the future. I know, the future is uncertain. No one can predict it. However, I believe that what he wrote was a glimpse of the possible future he saw. I was intrigued when I read his letter, as of course there is no historical record of these events occurring back in the day, but now I'm terrified about the future. If his vision was correct, what is going to happen to humanity as the battle for the souls of mankind unfolds? How does the whole pillars thing work? How close are we to this event? Is it related to what religion has dubbed as apocalypse? I will continue my research. I feel that I'm getting closer to something important. I'll let you know as soon as I find more information. Apparently, I did the right thing by getting away from the Pentex Corporation, as I saw a lot of disturbing things while checking the file dump I took from their servers. These guys have been following Carlvos's life, and some other specials as well, whose names I will research to see their relevance in this story. According to some internal emails that got copied while I dumped the information to my hard drive, they know about the fall of the Veil, and are actually trying to find a way to make it fall, so the apocalypse begins. I have findings on the pillars, who are also being sabotaged by Pentex. As far as I know, they already disposed of one of the pillars, and it worries me that that failsafe will not work with just 14 out of 15. And Carlvos was right about the whole universal distribution thing. The mainstream religions based on Christian faith have it partially right. There are 3 destinations for your personal energy. You either go to heaven, hell, or limbo according to them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this mythological heaven or hell are real. These are dimensions similar to the dimensions where the technocracy sent the fabled creatures into. What they didn't get right is that limbo is actually the underworld, or the land of oblivion, and this one has a regent as well. Now, according to what I've found, heaven is ruled by Jeshua, hell by Lucifer, and the underworld is ruled by someone I don't have the name for. But Carlvos has referred to him before as Fishface, as it seems he had a run-in with the guy and they don't like each other, which is impressive, considering that if this guy is higher power himself, he could easily destroy someone like Carlvos on a whim. But without drifting away from the pillar's information, there are, in fact, 15 of them. There should be 4 females, 9 males, and 2 special. One for the light side, so I suppose mages, elves, and the like, and the other for the darkness side, so I suppose vampires, werewolves, etc. What Carlvos refers to was a long-forgotten bard song, which lyrics have been reused at some point recently. 15 candles, redeemers of this world, 4 pink, 9 blue, 2 black. Each one of these powers personally chose 5 souls, but the specials were able to get 2 vessels included as part of the Pillar's roster, so they could keep having vessels available after the battle is done. According to some documents, the battle will have lots of battlegrounds, and it could drag on for months. However, at some point at the battle's peak, the pillars should activate and the universe should be balanced out again. But this is supposed to be possible only if all the pillars are there in the battle. I don't know if the failsafe will work at all, if some or all are missing. And since this is part of Pentex's objectives to remove all the pillars from existence, I don't know if this would mean the end of humanity. If I've understood the emails correctly, Pentex is composed of some really old and bad specials who want to watch the world burn, basically. They will stop at nothing to see the battle unfold as badly as possible and get the human race destroyed, the world in ruins, and darkness taking over the whole world. I will continue my investigation on this front as well, but the more I found, the more questions arise, and more is needed to get the whole picture. It's taking a toll on my mind, as I don't know if I'm being paranoid or if the shadows I see move unnaturally are part of the La Sombra vampire clan I've read about. I will inform you on the clans, as I have found some information about them as well. For the time being, I will stop right here. There's so much I've learned in the past week I don't know how to process. There's so much lore I've gotten, and even though all this information looks like a bad fairy tale, it makes a lot of sense if you think about it for a moment. I know I'm not crazy, even if it feels like I am. It was a hard wake-up. Being crushed by the ocean on a daily basis is something you get accustomed to after years in the same situation, as with everything in life. The hardest part of it all is not being able to fight it. You don't have control of your own muscles. Your bones are no support at all, and they're fragmented into thousands of little pieces. And then, the pain. The constant pain you feel when your body starts recovering from all the accumulated damage it has taken, despite the fact that the thing causing it is not there anymore. It hurts like hell. It took 2 months in a godforsaken cave to regain most of my movement. I say most, because there's some parts that take longer to recover. For me, it was my kneecaps. Even though my accelerated metabolism and Kane's blood running through my veins helped a lot, it takes a long time for you to be completely okay. I still have this fear of water. I don't like swimming, although I do it if I absolutely must. But it was during this time that I met her, Nocturna. Nocturna had this chiseled jawline that looked like a work of art. I was mesmerized by her arrogance. She was no way like any other woman I had met before. Her haughtiness, her disdain for all living things, her "I could destroy you all if I want to" attitude, made me pay attention to her. And pay attention I did, as I saw a glimpse of myself in her eyes. I didn't recognize the land I was stepping into. It all felt too surreal. Her appearance only made it more surreal, and in the surrealism, I saw beauty. The beauty of art that somehow you cannot describe. It feels magical. As I approached her for the first time, I felt something that I had not felt for anyone before, not even Elena. I felt I found an equal. She was ruthless and despised all the world, as if she was accustomed to step on everyone just to get to the top. I loved that immediately, as I am the same, and we started having this irresistible passion that made my heart beat, a feat not very common in my brethren. Being with her made me feel like I had the world at my feet, and she was my queen and my muse. I decided to use my talents to get rich, and riches did I get. I got a plot of land and built my own castle there, for this king to offer his queen a kingdom to rule. But then it happened. She started feeling like I felt for her, and her ambition died. She started acting like any other mortal woman, mesmerized by my power and my own ambition, and I despised her. All the power she showed was gone. All her disdain disappeared. All that was left was this pool of gooey, sticky, fearful love. And knowing what love tends to cause in women, I left her. Out of spite, I found the meanest, baddest-looking witch and courted her. And her, not giving a rat's ass for anyone, decided to go with it, especially since it meant for her to feel above Nocturna, which she wasn't. But it worked better than expected. Nocturna was out of my life, and I was free again, to follow my heart to glory and power. I did lots of bad things while I learned how to generate a vessel on the other side. Killed a lot of people to gain more knowledge and power. But the most important piece of information came, of all sources, from Nocturna herself. On our first night together, as passion grew and things started to go carnal, I wanted to bite her and feel her warm blood flowing in my mouth. But she stopped me cold. She told me that her kind doesn't have blood on its own, and that there was a breed of vampire whose blood could damage them. But this was all a legend, and no one had even tried it. This piece of information was enough for me to go into overdrive, looking for the information on which clan had that curious power. And searching, I found a really old library rat, a Nosferatu with a lot of books recovered from different sources. One of those talked about a special gift from Cain for his most beloved daughter. The elder of the Toreador clan saw this gift as a blessing for himself, but it was shared amongst her breed. I knew I had to test it, but since Nocturna left this plane, I didn't know how to. Then the opportunity arose. I knew she would want to exert revenge on me because of her broken heart, and I knew Fishface would definitely help her, as she was his little girl. I didn't know how they would fight, but I was ready for anything, except I didn't realize they fight dirty, and they took me out of combat before it even began. When they came close, I was surrounded by this dark mist, and darkness engulfed me. When I woke up again, I was in a dark room surrounded by all his Reaper's commanders. My limbs didn't work as I wanted. It felt like I was nailed to the floor, my arms as heavy as in the bottom of the ocean. I felt like I had the weight of the world over my shoulders. And then, out of the mist, he came out, with her by his side. Anku told me he had seen all my sins, and they were not as bad as the many sins of my brethren. But I damaged something precious to him, and he wanted compensation. I was to be thrown in the soul well, and to be crushed by this maelstrom, over and over, for all eternity. And since he would throw me in body and soul, I would feel it all, and he would delight in my suffering, as I had delighted in hers. And then, I was out again. I woke up feeling worse than before. The crushing feeling was back, as well as the damage from the pressure of these waters. These are meant to hold a soul prisoner, not a body. My body was damaged because of the pressure, and decayed because of the water. I felt like I was done for, this time for sure. I knew I hurt someone I shouldn't have, but there was not much I could do, as Anku would not accept my apologies. And then, when all hope was lost, I saw her. Elena was there, her soul at least. She saw me and held me, the warmth of her love running through every inch of my body. She cried, apologizing for what she did to me and my crew. She said all she could do to compensate what she had done to me was to help me get out of there. And then she took my hands and used the force of the swirl to throw me further away from the center, sinking herself deeper as she did this. I was at peace with her, finally, and promised myself to find her in the next life. Then, I swam to the top. I was weak and I was dizzy. My body kept decaying further, but it kept regenerating, so every inch of my body hurt like hell. But I was alive, and close to the border. I used the little strength I had left to wade to the border of the well, and with a last push, I got out of there. I was thirsty. I needed blood. But I was not out of the land of oblivion yet. I made my way to some bushes and hid behind them for a while my body finished regenerating. It looked like I was 150, just skin and bones. But I had to survive. I had to get away from there. And I saw my chance. Every single creature I had seen so far was of the same complexion as Nocturna, as her father, and as every single Reaper I had seen, except for these rats. Those seemed to be just regular rats, and the thirst clouded my judgment. I jumped at them, a huge pack that seemed to be just ready to be squeezed. I never realized that Nocturna might have something to do with it. I just ran for them. I hunted them down, draining every single drop of blood from their little bodies, the warmth of it giving me the much-needed heat, their life force giving me back my strength and healing my body. My mind was starting to work normally again. My body kept healing and healing, until I was no longer a shadow of my former self. Then I realized they had made a huge mistake. They threw me in full armor and with my trusty sword in hand. I had my weapons. I had the will to fight. I was sure it might be impossible, but I had to try. And then I saw them. 2 guards were following the trail of dead rats to my location. In my blind thirst, I had done nothing to hide the bodies. Idiotic me did nothing to cover my position. I had broken the first rule on warfare. Never reveal your position. And now, I was there. Not 30 meters away from 2 Reaper guards, floating in the wind, and sure that there was something very, very wrong. That day, I broke almost every single rule to survive. I didn't care how much I hated to break them. I just needed to survive. To be back in my castle. To reach back to Earth. I wanted to smell the saltpeter smell of the ocean. The wind on my skin. I wanted to be alive. I wanted to be free, and I would stop at nothing except certain death to get it. I remembered Nocturna's words, and the information I had read. I decided to go for it. It was my only chance at survival. I took my swords and cut my hands with them, took the few rats left on a poach I had on me, and attacked them with my swords, covered in my blood. That precious blood I had just gotten back. When they saw me, they laughed, seeing this material being trying to fight those immaterial bodies. I remembered to cover my mouth and my nose in my own blood. The smell of it almost sent me into a frenzy, but I had to have my mind sharp. I needed to be aware of what I was doing if I was to survive. They tried to surround me with their toxic cloud and knock me out again. But when the mist touched my body, it became ashes. Ashes were easier to deal with, and I thrusted my sword to the one closer to me, and then I felt it. That feeling you get when you cut someone with your steel, the pressure of your muscles pushing through their bodies. He looked at me with a look of disbelief on his face, his eyes wide open, while he felt something he never had felt before. He felt pain. I crossed my secondary sword to deliver the final blow when I heard the wind being cut by the whistle of his partner's sword, ready to cut my arm from above the elbow. I used my combat reflexes and learned a new trick, as when I threw my secondary weapon up to intercept his. His weapon broke with the clash of my steel covered in my blood. I took my other weapon out of the hole in the first guard's body and left him on the floor, his life escaping his body, his wound rotting the rest of it, as if it were water upon ash. I didn't want to be distracted with the absolute beauty of his death, so I turned my back at him and faced his partner. Fear was set in his eyes as he knew he was done for, that this opponent seemed indestructible, my eyes glowing with incorruptible determination. I felt his fear. I saw it in his aura. Thank Cain for Auspex. It was resulting more useful now than ever. I jumped and threw a cut at his neck and saw his head fall off from his body, his mind racing with fear as his life was ended so fast. I fell down to my knees, tired as this newly recovered body would have needed a couple of months to be in shape, but I didn't have the time. I would rest when I reached back home. There is, as they say, no rest for the wicked. I jumped to the branches of the withering tree that was beside me and realized my combat reflexes were sharp. I had covered my back while fighting, and it had worked for me this time. I would have to see what it would be for the next combat. When I reached the highest branch, I saw a path. It was at least 3 or 4 kilometers long, with many guards posted every couple hundred meters. I also saw a thick forest, so I thought I might try that way and see how far I would go undetected. I jumped down and broke an ankle, so I had to heal it immediately. Nothing worse than a bad foot to have in combat. I started moving from shadow to shadow, getting closer to my destination. I passed a couple of guard posts undetected. Their aura did not show interest on the sounds of the forest, as I ran as quietly as I could through the vegetation. And then I saw it. There were barbed branches all around the place. This was not a thick forest. It was a natural trap. No way I could cut through it before sunrise. Then I heard a shriek, and I looked up. There was this creature that looked like a dragon, but uglier, meaner. I readied my swords and realized the blood had dried from them, so I cut my arms along the veins to have a steady flow of blood. I knew this was going to be a hard battle, and thanked myself for the fantastic grip my gauntlets provided, as they were custom made. The creature came down from the sky and faced me, its mouth filled with dagger-like teeth. I sprinted back towards it, and as it opened its jaws to bite me in half, I threw myself into a slide passing barely below the mouth, and then I thrusted my swords up. I felt them slide on the top of the scales, and I couldn't believe how stupid I was, thinking this thing had a soft spot, when I heard a crack. My blood had withered the scales, and I took the chance, thrusting my swords, one on the neck, and the other near where its heart should be. I pushed and pressed, and forgot my own mouth had dried blood as well, until the heavy dark mist started escaping its body. I took my swords out and rolled to the side as the creature fell, and I dampened my beard again with my blood. I felt exhilarated. I felt fantastic. I felt so powerful, like I could take on Anku if I wanted right away. But I regained my senses and heard a change on the wind, as more guards came to see what the fuss was about. There were 6 of them. 3 came to investigate the dead dragon. The other 3 were looking at the surroundings, taking care of the group. It would be a challenge, but I had just killed my first dragon, and I felt they were no match for me. They were about to prove me wrong. I stepped out of the shadows with a sadistic grin on my face. I knew this always helped instill fear in my opponents, but these were different. They were used to being the ones causing fear, but my grin at least confused them. They had this baffled look on their faces, as I thought maybe no one had done what I just did to this beast. The ones looking at the surroundings started surrounding me, as I gave them just enough space behind my back. I let myself be surrounded, something I was about to regret. I jumped at the one closer to me, swords covered in fresh blood as it was still flowing through the blades. A couple of cuts, and I disposed of 2 of them. 4 more to go. But then I felt it. 2 of the guys behind me thrusted their swords into my chest and through the armor. It hurt, but more importantly, it burned, as their swords started corroding inside my chest, and fumes came out of them. The burning sensation was worse. I felt like every nerve on my body was on fire, and I was about to pass out. Something clicked in the back of my mind, and my instincts took over. It was the desire for survival. It was the certainty that I would fight until I was out of there, or every piece of my body was turned to ash. I turned fast, breaking the corroded blades inside my body and pulling them out of my chest. I was angry. This primal rage the beast gives you to survive. I jumped at the closer one, whom was still in shock seeing his weapon rotting in his hands. I wanted to take his life with my bare hands. I wanted to give him more pain than the one I had just endured. So I went for his mouth. As soon as my blood came in contact with his skin, it started to wither away. I pushed my fingers inside his mouth and pulled it open, feeling his jaw tear apart as it was rotting and withering away. He screamed. A mix of pain and fear and anguish resounded through the forest as his life left his body. I turned to the 3 guards left, and they were shocked. Now I was sure I was a terror to behold from their point of view, and total annihilation was coming their way. I took advantage of their shock and jumped at the one next to me, killing him instantly. Then, I ran for the 2 left, as I knew I didn't have much time left. The shrieking and screaming in the last couple of minutes would send all the closer guards to investigate, and I was starting to wear out from all the adrenaline. I took my swords back from the ground and thrusted them upward, going through their heads and killing them instantly. I had lost blood. I was tired. I was feeling weak, and I hadn't moved past half a kilometer. It was a long way to go. I took my pouch and fed on the last few rats left, feeling the adrenaline rush back, leaving me ready to go. All that was left behind me was the rotting carcass of the dragon, and some mounds of dark ashes. I saw my empty pouch, and decided it would be best to soak it in blood and use it as an impromptu mask, instead of having ashes stuck directly to my face. I took a little time to figure out my next move, as I moved to the other side of the road, and waited to see if someone else was coming. When I knew no one else would, I started moving from shadow to shadow up the road. I passed a couple more guard posts, being as stealthy as I could, and decided to rest a bit under the cover of the shadows. I heard then the cracking noises of horses running up the road. I was sure they didn't need those here, with the dragons and their immaterial floating bodies. But it was a new pleasant surprise. I was sure the previous guard posts were now in full alert mode, and at some point, this road would be full of patrols, so I had to act now. When the noise was very close, I jumped from the shadows and stepped in the middle of the road. There were two of them, in full body armor, and riding two horses. Their weapons looked stronger, thicker. Those would definitely hurt me. But the horses looked just like regular horses, only completely black. No immaterial look. No dark mist floating around them, except around the knights. I was sure this is what they were, as one of them had a banner, and they looked more experienced. This would be a bigger challenge. Blood was just starting to clot around my blades, but it was still mostly liquid. I forgot about my wounds. They closed on their own when I fed. Well, it had to work just like it was. Their armor looked sturdier than mine, and I wondered if it could be possible to wear one of those, if I could put my hands on it. I decided to test it, and swung my sword at one of them, so some blood would reach both the horses and the riders. The horse and the armor were not damaged by it, so I suppose this was some sort of contingency, but allowed me to realize that I could use their armor, and that those horses could be used by me as well. I readied for battle as they dismounted, and realized these guys were going to be a bigger problem for me. They had full body armor and chainmail. Everything was covered in some sort of way. I had to think of a way to get to them without damaging at least one armor, as I would need it if I wanted to reach the gates. I thanked Cain again, as I had the precaution to get my swords from dwarven smiths, as they were sturdy and sharp. The two knights attacked at the same time, but they were slow. I thought they were not used to the armor, but they were actually heavier than I thought, as I would later learn. They attacked hard. Their blows were hard to repel with my swords, and I realized that they were using weapons and armor from a different plane. A good way to defend themselves. I was having a hard time fighting them. I was tired, and I needed more blood, but they kept going at it with all their strength. My attacks were easily repelled with their armor, and I didn't know what to do. I just kept repelling their attacks and formulating my own plan when one of their hits made contact, and they cut my hand off my body. I felt the pain of the blade going through my flesh, the weight of the sword breaking up my bones. I felt I was going to pass out. My body had accumulated more damage than I could heal immediately, and I thought I was done for. But then, as the blood pumped from my veins at full speed, the stream splattered in one of the helmets and through the visor. He shrieked, as the full flow must have entered his eyes and covered his face, withering all the tissue as it ran through it, and he fell down in agonizing pain. I turned to the other knight, who was distracted as this happened, and swung my stump at his face, hitting the visor with my stump and sending a whole new stream of blood straight through it. He fell down as well, convulsing from the pain and the damage. When they stopped moving, I removed their helmets and started thinking of what to do next. I confirmed their deaths and remembered the horses. I've always loved those animals, but they were going to serve me more than they could imagine. I forced one to drink my blood and made it my ghoul, and then jumped at the other and started drinking its blood. I used it to recover all my strength, and to recover my hand while I kept drinking and drinking, draining it dry. It was a much-needed blood source, and a huge one at that. Not only did I recover all I needed at the moment, it left me filled up and satisfied, my thirst in check, and my mind focused. With my new hand ready, I moved the body of the dead horse and the armor from the way, and changed into a new one, heavy but fully covered. Then, I rode my ghoul horse, carrying their banner, and went up the road, full speed, galloping hard, and leaving confused guard posts all the way behind me. I had an advantage as I was hiding in full view. They didn't bother to look twice when they saw the banner. Finally, in the last 500 meters, I saw the gates. They were gargantuan, and they were guarded by two giants twice my own size. I realized I was in huge trouble, but I was just recovered, full of blood, and ready to battle. Apparently, the knights I disposed of were going to alert not only the guard posts, but the gate guards as well. When they saw me with the banner, they talked between them, and one of them abandoned the post and started coming my way. I had little time left before he reached my position, so I decided to let my blood flow again, and let the chips fall where they may. I took my dagger and stabbed my arm veins again, and readied my swords, as to have a steady flow of blood on them. The giant was confused as he saw me do this, but then he realized what was going on, and sprinted towards me on full battle mode. I jumped off my horse running towards him as well, moving as fast as my not fully recovered body and the weight of my armor allowed me to. His first blow took me by surprise. I never saw him move, but he connected a blow to my chest. I felt my ribs crack under the bent armor, sharp pain running through my body. Thank Cain I didn't need to breathe. Otherwise that battle would have been over for me right then. My eyes clouded for a moment, though, while I tried to concentrate in the battle at hand, instead of the pain I was feeling. And then, a second blow hit me. This time his sword went through the bend of the armor, and into my body, putting even more pain into my mind and my system. His sword was basically my own size, and it went across my torso, the tip of the sword buried underground with the force of the thrust. I thought I was going to faint. His steel inside my body, my armor completely useless and heavy. I couldn't move. I felt lost. I heard the voice of Anku in my mind, laughing at my predicament, repeating constantly, "Not so tough now, huh, blood-sucking leech?" And I felt the beast starting to take over, where most of my brethren would have succumbed to Rotrek. I went into frenzy. The next moments of battle were like I was seeing my body act on its own, my conscious mind only a passenger in the back seat. I let out a scream, but it was a roar of primal rage, pure, concentrated, unadulterated hate. I hated being there. I hated feeling defeated. I hated Anku for hunting me down, and I hated Nocturna for changing. I hated my own frail body. I hated to feel imprisoned, to be pinned down like a fly by this huge sword across my torso. With a fast movement of my arm, I snapped his sword in two and moved up, releasing myself from the blade. I took the armor off, my skin exposed, but ready to move as fast as I could. Celerity was a blessing at this point. As Auspex had been so far, the guard's aura showed a hint of fear as he flinched a step back, not believing his eyes. Anku's voice sounded once more, but this time it was like a thunder across his realm. "Do not let him escape. He has to pay for his sins. He will be my puppet, but this play is not over. So for now, take him down, even if you have to dismember him. He will survive that." I was more than furious after that. I screamed at the sky, "Come and face me yourself, fish face. This leech will show you what pain feels like. In your disgusting, slimy body, I will tear your limbs apart with my bare hands. Keep hiding behind your army like the coward you are. The three of you are all the same. Self-righteous assholes, cowering behind wave after wave of minions to destroy." And then I jumped, with my swords in my hands, towards the giant's face. I thrusted them up with all my force, landing on his eyes and through his head, my arms elbow deep inside his skull. I gained footing up his shoulders, and I felt the air in my hands, so I lifted them up with all my strength, anger empowering me. His skull bones started digging inside my arms, until I felt his neck ripping apart and his head coming off of his body. I landed on my feet, his body landing beside me, and my arms stuck inside his head, as it started to rot and wither away. I looked up, and the last guard between me and the gate was ready to fight, but his aura showed pure fear. I grinned while cleaning my arms of the disgusting ashes and goo of the previous one, and licked my blade, cutting my tongue with it, but letting a fresh cover of blood along it. His fear suddenly became focus. He was ready to win or die. I suppose in the land of oblivion, there are worse fates than death. He jumped in the air, thrusting his spear longer than his body at me. I moved to the side, barely avoiding the blade. It still managed to scratch my skin, sending a new wave of pain, as my body was busy reconstructing my insides and my ribcage. I turned to face him, and he was already moving his spear towards my neck. I threw myself down and rolled to the side, escaping the next 2 hits by inches. He was on top of me, and I was just a rat he was trying to incapacitate to deliver as prey. I decided to turn the tide, rolling underneath him and cutting one of his legs in the process. As his skin and muscles started to wither and decay, he managed to stab my shoulder with his blade. He changed his footing to balance, as his other leg was no longer functional, and with a moment took my whole arm out of its socket, ripping it off and sending me another wave of high-level pain. I lost more limbs and received more damage in less than 3 hours than in the last 40 years combined. I screamed, the pain keeping me from passing out. I turned to the side and let a stream of blood hit his chest, but it only landed on his chest plate, and he took it off. Besides the leg, he was unscratched. I stood up as fast as I could, while he removed his chest plate, and when he threw it down, I jumped with my only arm, ready to cut his chest. He managed to avoid the first cut, but I managed to scratch his abdomen enough for his skin to begin withering away. He must have been feeling pain, but he kept his footing. At least I had him almost pinned down to the same location. I saw this as my chance, and ran around him as fast as I could, spraying him with my blood. He screamed in pain as his skin withered and damaged him further. Then, when his pain seemed unbearable, I jumped and thrusted my sword into his chest, all the way to the handle. I left my sword inside him as he fell to his knees, his life escaping his body. I contemplated his death, this work of warfare art, and spit on the floor. I knew more warriors were coming this way, and the shrieks of distant dragons confirmed it. I had to act. I ran to the door and saw a huge padlock I was sure not even the guards were able to open. I had little time, so I sprayed more blood on top of the padlock and went back to my horse. I apologized, but I needed to recover fast, so I drained it as well. And while I recovered my arm, I went back to the padlock and hit it as hard as I could, shattering it to pieces. I opened the gates and saw the bridge. It was like something from Escher. Impossible angles and pathways merged together. And, to my dismay, there were 3 suns orbiting it. I saw 2 more destinations orbiting the suns, and realized those were the 3 vacation spots for your own energy. I had to get away from it and go back to my castle. I needed to be free. But the accumulated damage so far, and the extra damage from 3 suns, will only leave a pile of ashes somewhere in that bridge. I analyzed my options as I heard the dragon shrieking closer, and I decided the only option was to cover myself somehow, while I ran with all the speed and power both celerity and potence could give me. The gifts from my sire were really useful at this moment, and I would find him and thank him properly when I had the chance. Then, as I took my eyes away from the sky where the dragons came to me, I saw it. The pile of goo and ashes that were the bodies of the guards was my only chance. Disgusted by the smell and the touch of that tar-like substance, I covered myself head to toe with it. It felt like my whole body was on fire, but this would cover myself from the fire of the sun. And then, I ran. I closed my eyes, hoping I wouldn't end on any other realm besides my own, where my castle and my servants awaited. I ran because my life literally depended on my speed. I ran like I never thought I would. And then, I ran some more for good measure. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't dare to open my eyes. I felt my muscles tear apart several times as I ran. I felt my skin begin to burn as the sunlight slipped through the cracks. I kept running, for I don't know how long. My legs couldn't support me anymore, but I kept running out of sheer willpower. And then, as I felt a bone break, and I lost my footing, I fell into a cool night wind. I opened my eyes. My body was a ruin, but it was nighttime, and the fresh wind was blowing. I crawled until I saw a couple of deers. Those would have to suffice. I drank the blood out of their bodies, and let my body heal at a more natural rate. I needed to rest. I was destroyed, but I was free. I then decided that the last of Cain's gifts would be my way to go. I had learned how to merge with the earth from a gangrel a few years back, but I never actually tried it. I laid on my back and then allowed my body to merge, falling into a deep slumber that became a lethargy. I know this has been a long log, but this is as far as his first piece of the story goes. I will continue to research, but I just got a text message. It says it's him, and he wants to meet me in person. But I will have to travel south, to a tropical country for that. I will let you know how it goes after I meet him, but I don't know when I will post again. I met him, and he looked nothing like I imagined. He told me that he stopped using North European vessels as a means to cover his tracks. He also told me that he had tried to lay low during the last 200 years after he declined Pentex's offer, and they started to hunt him down. We talked about science and how it related to who they are, what they do in this universe, this plane. His desire for knowledge has kept him alive. It has allowed him to be able to curve, as he has kept himself updated on many knowledge areas. He has been learning as much as he can, just to be able to survive the battle for the souls of mankind. We talked about the pillars, but he made me promise not to say anything more about that. We also talked about the warriors of destiny, and the many things he has lived. I asked him for his permission to record his story, so I could pass it on. And man, the things he told me are worth a book which I would consider writing. For the moment, I will share one more story about his life, and I will help him as much as I can to save mankind. It might be above his or my head, but it's an effort that deserves to be done. To hell with Pentex, and all the powers trying to destroy the world. When I woke up, it was nighttime again. I got out of my improvised grave and assessed the damage. My body was recovered, but I looked malnourished. The few clothes I had left on me were basically rags. I wondered how long I had been out. It should have been more than just months. I decided to go to my castle, to my servants. I needed to change and see what my next movement would be. I looked up at the stars, trying to give myself some sort of location, and I realized I was away from home. Learning to navigate using the stars during my piracy days was a very important skill nowadays. I started walking southeast to the direction where I knew my home was, until I saw a road and decided to follow it. I remembered a couple of towns before my castle, little hamlets surrounded by a thick forest. The thirst was back, but I needed something else to saturate it. I needed human blood. I needed to feel normal. My mind was still woozy, and I knew all I needed was blood. As I approached the town's entrance, I realized there were lots of changes, and I wondered if I was actually in the right place, if my mind was not playing tricks on me. The main road, with a couple of houses on the side, were now big homes, farms on the sides, and a huge, fully lit main road. I looked like a beggar, all malnourished and with torn clothes on. I was trying to formulate my story, as this town seemed full of life. I decided it was simpler to go for beggar, and I saw some of them around the streets. It could be a much-needed meal, even though not the best one, and no one would miss them. I took a walking stick from a nearby tree and entered the town with my most inconspicuous look. I smelled bad, looked bad, and sure as hell no one would notice me. I would be just one more beggar. I acted like one, asking for food and spare change for a warm bed. Everybody looked at me and pretended I was not there. except the beggars. I saw them looking at me in a less than friendly way. I entered their territory, and now I was their target. I laughed mentally, as I knew it was the other way around completely. I saw them closing on me, so I started to retreat to a poorly lit street, away from the crowd and from the pesky eyes. The lure was set, and the prey was falling for it. I turned around a corner, and I heard their steps moving faster behind me. It was a closed alley, perfect for what I had in mind. Quietly, I jumped to a rooftop and waited for my prey to corner themselves. 3 guys showed up. I suppose the other 2 stayed behind keeping guard. When they reached the back alley, they started moving things to find where I was hiding. They sounded angry, and I assessed my targets. I went for the bigger one first. It would save me trouble later. I jumped from the roof to his back, biting his jugular and feeding right away. I tried to be as stealthy as possible, and it seemed to work. No noise was heard, besides the noise his partners were doing while searching for me. I knew I didn't have much time left before one of the other guys turned around and saw me. I left some blood in his body and jumped up again, just as one of the other 2 turned around and saw his partner drop to the floor unconscious. They were fully alert. I forgot to lick his wounds and close my bite, and they saw the mark on his neck. I was sloppy, but I was out of practice after my lethargy. As one of them decided to run back and alert the other 2, I jumped back and faced them, with the nastiest grin on my face, to make them freeze on the spot. It worked better than expected, as one of them peed on himself. I jumped to the next one and drank from him, as I lifted the other one in the air from the neck, so he wouldn't make any noise. I left the second one unconscious, and then went for my third victim. Too bad this was the only one roughly my size, and his pants were soaked in urine. I left the 3 of them unconscious in the alley, feeling rejuvenated, and I remembered to lick the wounds so there wouldn't be mass hysteria. My senses were coming back to me, little by little, and I heard the other 2 guys asking each other what was taking the other 3 so long. I could either take 2 more victims and the much-needed blood, or I could just flee and search for clothes to change and a place to take a bath. I felt disgusting for how I looked like. Not even Nosferatu looked like this. I went for the second option, as it would be better to look more appealing and get my next dose from better victims. Plus, the pee smell I felt around me was not going to go away for a while, at least from my own nose, and I needed to clean myself. I felt dirty and disgusted by it. I went through the rooftops until I saw some clothes hanging around. I hadn't time to be picky, so I took them from the ropes, and I left the town. It was close to midnight, and I still had stuff to do. I found a lake in a nearby cave. I remembered using the lake to court Nocturna, but it was completely changed. There was a dock for little rowboats, and some wheat fields around it. It was no longer the peaceful peace of nature I remember. I looked around for the cave I used, sometimes just to contemplate the lake before dawn, and found it as it was before. And I thank the stars no one had touched it so far. I went inside and looked for my blankets, hidden in a crevice in the rocks, but they were torn apart and dirty, as if they weren't used for many years, instead of months. I decided to rest up a bit, deeper inside the cave, and wait until the next night to clean up and change. When I woke up, the sun was about to set. I waited until I saw the night set in, and then I went to the lake to take a much-needed bath, even though I just escaped from underneath the 2 watery graves. I swam to the bottom of this fresh water, letting my body relax and left my mind at peace for a moment. I took my time to clean myself, feeling the fish around my legs and the water running through my body while I tried to forget all the events I just passed. I did a resistance check on my body and found that my legs, arms, and torso were back to normal. The same way I was when I was turned into a vampire some years back. The question in the back of my mind, the one that didn't let me rest, was, how many, exactly? How long have I been out? Did time move at the same pace in the land of oblivion? I decided to let go of all those concerns at the moment, and just head back out to the dock. Let the wind dry my skin. This has always been one of the most amazing feelings for me. I went inside the cave once I dried myself and dressed up. I was feeling more like a person now. I decided to skip the next town and just go straight to my castle. I wanted to sleep in my own coffin and find out what happened and how long I'd been out. When I reached my castle, it was in ruins. It seemed like it had been burned to the ground and demolished looking for something. I saw a couple of skeletons, and I wondered if they were my servants or the attackers. I went through the hidden entrance and my treasure was gone, but behind the hidden passage, my armory was still complete, and my coffin was there. I decided to rest among my weapons and find information on what happened to decide what to do next. I removed the tasteless clothes I had stolen and changed into a light armor. I knew for the time being it would be better to be armored and ready for battle. I took my bastard sword and my scimitar and put them in my bag, and I went out the next night to get answers and to get to work on an idea that had sat quietly in the back of my mind. I had to learn how to weaponize my blood with as little damage to myself as possible. I knew that if I needed answers, I needed to go to the prince, so I got a horse and went to his castle to request an audience. When I spoke to the guardian of the Elysium, he ran to the throne room and came back a few moments later. Prince Delacrux wanted to see me immediately for debriefing. I went into the throne room, and the prince stood up as if someone extremely important just came in, not as if just a mere Generation 8th vampire came inside. I was surprised by his behavior, and he had asked me what had happened in the last 25 years. That felt like a cold shower to me. 25 years lost. I was hoping for a few months, a year maybe. Since he was so into the story, I humbly asked him to tell me what he knew so I wouldn't bore him with details he already knew. I wanted to know more before knowing what to tell him. I wanted to have some privacy about the details of my escape from Manku's realm. The prince was amused by my request but obliged, so I was told the information I needed about the time missing. The prince was informed that I was taken by the Reapers, and a quarter of an hour later, a reconnaissance party from the underworld showed up, looking for me. That gave me a time frame. Time moves slowly in the underworld. I was out for about 6 hours total, but just 15 minutes passed in this plane. Man, a punishment there must feel like an eternity. I suppose I was back a little bit earlier, but they didn't know where to look for me. I was informed by the prince that the party found my castle and waited for a troop to arrive. The Reapers killed my servants, took my possessions, and destroyed everything. So I decided it would be best to hide the most important information, and I told them that I went out of the well on my own. I got one of their weapons and sneaked around in the shadows until I created a distraction and jumped out of there. I omitted the bridge as well, deciding that it would be best for them to know that out of the realm was just the portal to cross to the several dimensions, and I was lucky to fall into the right one. Prince Delacrux was delighted by my story and praised me for the escape. He asked me to request anything I wanted as boon for my wits and courage. I asked him if it would be possible for me to be trained in a new discipline, something that would allow me to use blood as a weapon, although I wasn't extremely specific. He said that a new clan of blood mages was part of the Camarilla, and he would request them to get someone to train me in some basic blood magic. I humbly accepted his answer and said I would go back to what was left of my castle to see how to rebuild. The prince replied that I shouldn't go back alone, as the Reapers would go there from time to time to keep tabs. I told him I needed my armory and my coffin, and a way to get some land again to build another castle for me. Then, as I was explaining this to him, a door opened, and Lionel Malkath, the sire of the whole Malkavian clan, came to me. He looked at me head to toe, then talked to the prince. Daniel, I know this might sound like jumping the traditions, but I need to take him to the test chambers, as the Inner Circle deems necessary, to see if he can survive the Ankale test. Prince Delacrux looked at me, head to toe again, and said in a soft tone, "Of course, my lord. I won't try to underestimate the Inner Circle's motives, but it would be the first time I see you lower the bar for a neonate below 400 years, especially for someone just over a century." Malkav just replied, annoyed.
I'm glad you won't try to understand, just comply, and then turned at me, giving me a don't keep me waiting look, and left the room. I apologized to the prince and turned around as I heard the prince tell his closer advisor, if he manages to survive the tests in one piece, I will give him some money and some land myself. So I left the room as well, with a smile on my face, following Malkav at a prudent distance. He snapped his fingers, and I started walking beside him, and he just smiled. You know, he said, that you seem to be a special case. I am more interested in your results than the other antediluvians. I sense that out of the many gifts from Cain, you have been very keen on the use of auspex. Not even my children found out the importance of this discipline before a couple 100 years passed. You don't need to lie to me. I know what you told Delacrux, but I know this is not the whole story. I won't pester you to tell me, but I know you will when you deem appropriate. For now, please rest, and drink as much blood from our personal reserve as you want, because you're going to need it tomorrow. And with that said, he left me in a very clean, very opulent room with a huge and well-adorned coffin. A servant came, with a couple of females, to entertain me as a much-needed meal. I drank from them and had some fun, feeling better than I had in years. Then I went inside the coffin and rested. The next night I woke up feeling amazing. I was well rested, well recovered, the thirst was in check, and I was about to be tested for an ascension. I was directed to the Great Hall, where I saw a conference table and 15 vampire lords sitting, waiting for me. The prince, the inner circle, and Cain himself was there. Rose Oracle, the sire of all the Toreador clan, was sitting to Cain's right, and she stood up with a huge smile on her face. "My child," she said, "I feel honored to hear so many good things about you. It's not common that a fledgling such as yourself accomplishes so much in so little time. The time has come for you to show us if my pride in you is justified. We have devised a test of the skills you have shown so far. You will need to assess your targets, dispose of the werewolf and the traitor vampire without damaging the one with a deranged mind, and then leave the test chamber without falling into any of the traps set up on the way back." She sat down, and then the prince stood up and took the word. "Usually, we provide weapons and protection to Neonites for these tests. However, since you brought your own, this is what you will use." Then, as the priest sat down, another antediluvian stood up. This one I had not met before, but he had a sadistic look in his eyes. "Since you claim to have seen the aura of a Reaper, and use this as the information source for you to complete your daring escape, you will need to use the auspex to complete this trial. And since I don't believe you are actually able to see a Reaper's emotions and aura, you will have to convince me this actually happened. So before you get into the test chamber, I will remove your eyes." Rose stood up, completely furious at him. "This was never part of the test when we discussed it. Lucien and I will not allow you to harm one of my children to please your psychopathic mood. Why don't you torture one of your blue blood spoiled brats?" I had heard about Lucien Vedhartha before, the sire of the Venture clan, and now I knew why my clan hated him so much. Cain cleared his throat, and the whole room fell silent. "Rose, if you trust your child so much, you won't have any problems with Lucien's request. And Lucien, since you think he is bluffing us on his escape details, I will allow your request to proceed. But since I care about your dignitas so much, if he proves himself with the conditions you requested, I will allow him to take your own eyes out." Rose looked at me and smiled, sending me a mental message using auspex. "No child below the 4th generation has ever touched this sadist. Go make me proud." Lucien scoffed. "No Toreador child will ever lay a finger on me." So, Cain replied, "If he proves himself, He will, or I will remove something more precious to you myself. Lucian looked at him and said, "So be it, my lord." So he came to me, and without a moment of flinch, he took my eyes out. I screamed because of this awful pain I felt running down my spine. He said out loud, "Who would have known? The little princess did not pass out." And I felt the beast fighting to take me over. I controlled myself out of pure willpower, knowing my mind should be clear for the battle to come, to be able to understand the signs Auspex would give me, while thinking, at some point, I will be a prince, and your progeny will pay for your sins. I heard Lionel's voice in my head. Already controlling the beast, are we? Impressive for someone whose wings are still wet. Now, let's see how you do. They took me through a series of chambers and hallways to get me to the test chamber. I was blind, and I was unable to activate Auspex, as the pain was not letting me concentrate. Finally, they stopped. I was left alone in a room, and I heard some more doors open. Auspex was still not giving me anything, and I heard steps moving around me. I was an easy target, blinded and confused. I remembered the times the Reapers almost got me. The limbs I lost and the desire to be free that set the whole thing in motion. And then I saw it. I saw 3 auras dancing around. They were not clear, so I tried to move away from them while I assessed my targets. I saw that 2 of the auras were paler than the other, so I assumed those were the vampires. I needed to know which was the traitor and which was the mad one. I decided to try and formulate a plan of attack, and I thought it would be best to go for the one I knew was the werewolf. I jumped at him with the swords in my hands, and attacked the brightest aura. I felt the sword scratch something, and then the aura became a vibrant, shiny red, and it began to grow at an accelerated rate, getting twice its size in less than 30 seconds. I heard 2 voices behind me, one of them saying, "I would rather die staked in the sunlight than in the hands of a werewolf," while the other one was saying, "What a pretty puppy. I want one for my birthday." I turned around briefly to check on their auras again, and I saw an aura flashing different colors, while the other one turned paler and paler. So I assumed the crazy one was the one with the flashing aura, and the paler one was a vampire succumbing to Ruttrick. I would use that information to turn the tide of this fight, but I felt an instant of panic and moved to a side. My mind registered the attack before my ears did, and I moved instinctively, but his nails scratched my back, and I felt the sharp pain of aggravated damage. I had an idea right there, as I felt the skin closing up again. I needed to add my aura perception to my main perception. I had to stop relying on my eyes and open my mind, see the whole battlefield, and I knew it was important to use the traitor as a means to dispose of him, while protecting the crazy one. I stopped for a moment, getting accustomed to see only what my aura perception would show, and I saw it again, as if I had eyes on my back. I saw the werewolf thrusting his claw forward, ready to take my head off. I threw myself to the floor, rolling towards the faintest aura, and stepping beside him. I waited until I felt another surge of rage, and heard a roar, and took the traitor by his neck and belt, throwing him to the open maw of this huge beast. He was bitten in half immediately, part of his aura snapping and dissipating. I knew where his torso was, and his aura was flashing with every hit of pain, and going down as his terror grew. I saw this worked better than expected, and the werewolf went on to attack the remains of the traitor, until he would be no more. So I ran to the other aura, who was coming closer and closer to the beast, and threw a punch at his head. I saw his aura dissipate as he fainted, so it was one less problem. The screams of the traitor gave me a sense of direction, and I saw the beast's aura shine in rage. And he was close to killing him, and was getting ready to come for me. I didn't have much time left. I had to act. I took my swords out and moved to what I thought was the beast's back. If I was mistaken, I would be snapped in two like the traitor. I jumped and pulled my swords up and pointed down, ready to stab him near the neck if possible. But then I was hit on the side by the beast, managing to get the bastard sword inside him near the shoulder blade. I knew he wouldn't be able to remove it, but I kept my grip as he tried desperately to take me off of him and scratching my leg badly as he did this. I must have torn a muscle as his other arm was just flailing now, no control over it whatsoever. I reassured my grip, pulling myself up and then stabbing him down again with the scimitar, cutting his other shoulder muscle and leaving him without working arms. His rage was even bigger than before, so he jumped and landed on his back with me on it. My legs and ribcage were crushed by his weight, but I had endured more in the underworld. I bit him on the neck, feeling a surge of rage as I sucked his blood. I wanted him dead, and it had to be now. I took the scimitar out of his body, and he howled out of pain. So when he had his neck up, I moved my arm up front, and then slashed at his throat as hard as I could. My strength was increased, and I later learned that was due to the lichened blood running through my body. His head was almost off when I rolled from below him and took my bastard sword out of his body. My eyes hadn't healed, as I realized either Lucy and her cane did something to me to stop me from recovering my eyes. Navigating through a maze without eyes would be difficult. Navigating through a maze full of traps without eyes would be close to impossible. I sat down to concentrate. I needed to see how else I could use Auspex to go back to the main room and complete the test. I remembered something I had read about a couple of extra uses of Auspex, but I was unable to remember them as my mind was still under the rage effects of the werewolf's blood. I tried to soothe myself, to think again with a cool head, and then I remembered astral projection. I had never tried, but I knew I needed to concentrate more and use the power from Kane's blood to do it. It was a huge task, but I was sure I would do it to prove myself. It took a long time, maybe an hour or so, but then I was able to. I saw the world in a different way as my body was sitting there next to the aftermath of the battle, but I could see what surrounded my body. I saw 4 doors, so I assumed each one of us was brought here through a different door. I started to move to the closest door and saw splashes of auras like prints, with the different emotions each one of these people had. I decided to analyze the doors so I wouldn't waste my time, and I was able to identify the door where I was brought in through, as it was the only one with no feeling attached whatsoever. I decided to go back through that gate and learned the way back while I figured out a way to disable or avoid the traps set in the maze. I turned a couple of times when I saw a handprint. It was curious for me because it looked like something done on purpose. I got near it to get a closer look, and I saw that it was on top of a brick that was a little bit out. Not in a noticeable way, but enough to look apparent now that I saw it. I wondered what would happen if I pressed it, so I decided to touch it, and I heard Lionel's voice in my head. "This is just a clue. Let's see if you can figure it all on the way out." I continued on, memorizing the twists and turns I had to do to get back out, and looking at the walls for other pressure plates or bricks. When I reached the last hallway, I saw a door, and I saw 16 auras outside. I knew this was the Great Hall. I let my body pull my projection back inside, and then I stood up. I started walking the way I had before, just using the information I'd memorized, and pressed every trigger before moving, activating every trap to disable it. I finally reached the last hallway and went up to the door. I was able to knock. When the door opened, I heard the hinges screech, and someone took me by my hand. I was moving towards the inner circle, and then I stopped. I heard Rosa's voice. "My child, well done. Not every day my progeny fills me with pride, and especially a fledgling. You have done well, and brought honor to our clan. You are the youngest one ever to be called Ankala. It's time to recover and change. You'll be conducted to the ceremony later." I was given a cup of blood, and I drank it, feeling my body recover completely and feeling my eyes again. The light hurt for a moment, and it took a little bit of focus, but I saw Kane's smiling face, Lionel approvingly nodding, and Rose's posture full of pride. Then I turned to Lucien, and he was bitter and angry. He looked at me and asked me, "Just explain to me, how could a Neo-Knight use Auspex in such an advanced way? Who trained you to make me look like a fool?" Rose was angry. Her face changed and was about to reply, but I lifted a hand up, stopping her. She looked at me with a confused look on her face, so I looked at her, nodded, and then looked back to Lucien. "My lord," I said, "unusual circumstances provide unusual results. If you feel someone made you look like a fool, and you want to find the culprit, please, my lord, ask your servants to get you a mirror." He was furious. I felt his beast trying to break free. I saw him about to jump at me, and then, in an incredibly fast movement, he was incapacitated by Kane's hand on his throat. He turned into the huge vampire beast you expect from the father of all, Lucien, just a little puppet in his hands. You cannot expect respect from those you disrespect. You were a fledgling once, just like him, and you were stupid enough to avoid learning and exploring what was important until you were forced by the circumstances. And now, after he has proven himself to us all, yourself included, you will pay for your own insolence. Corvus, come here and claim his eyes." I was ecstatic at this turn of events, but I was not going to disobey the orders of the father of all. I went up to them. Lucien's aura was showing fear and hate and anger in a weird mix. I reached up to his face and then snatched his eyes out. His scream was heard across the great hall as he started to convulse, and then he fainted for a moment. I saw his eyes become ashes in my hands and went back to my position in front of the inner circle. Lucien woke up, kicking and screaming, and Rose said out loud, "It seems that the little princess did pass out." The whole room exploded in laughter, and Lucien's rage was bigger, but he was still in Kane's hand. He gave him a sip from his own cup, and when his eyes recovered and focused on Kane, he told him, "This you brought on yourself because of your own stupidity. Go away now, and I expect your composure to be back by the time of the ceremony. You will not lay a finger on him, or I will deal with you and your progeny myself." Did I make myself clear? "Yes, my lord," replied Lucien. And he was brought back down. He apologized to all and left the room with his tail between his legs, as they say. Kane turned back down to his human form and then addressed to the prince. "Daniel, if you remember correctly, you said that you were going to give Corvus a plot of land and some money if he got out of there in one piece. Since he lost his eyes before going in, and he didn't lose a limb while inside the chamber, he accomplished what you deemed necessary to get this additional boon. So I want to praise your generosity and see what you're going to give him when you deliver it." "Yes, my lord. This way. I will show you what I will give him, and it will be delivered after the ceremony," replied Daniel. And then he turned to his constable and told him, "Please take him to his room and give him appropriate clothing for the occasion." I bowed to the inner circle and then followed him all the way back to my room. I got inside and decided to rest a bit, clean myself, and change. There was another cup of blood there, and I drank it, feeling a wave of euphoria and leaving me completely healed. No pain, no stress, no rage. I was exhilarated. I cleaned myself and changed my clothes to a really nice, really opulent outfit. When I finished changing, they took me to the ballroom, where I saw more vampires than I'd ever thought to find gathered together. They were lined up by ranks, the neonates at the back of the room, and the Methuselah all the way to the front. There was a runway from the door I entered, all the way to the front, where the inner circle and all the antediluvians were, in a long table. I went up to them, all eyes on me, and Cain himself stood up and spoke. "My children, it is an honor for me, and for the inner circle, to present you Carvus McCallan, the youngest child to be ascended to Ankale status based on his courage, his wits, and his prowess in combat. I expect great things from this artist and the art of combat. Give it up for him, and let all his accomplishments be known throughout all vampire society." I realized that this honor was a two-sided sword, as now everyone knew who I was. Everyone who was jealous at me for being declared Ankala before then, some of them over 600 years ago, would plot against me to take me down. There were truly happy faces, but there were also bitter, resented faces, clapping ironically at me. I knew I had to watch my back for two factors now: reapers and jealous vampires. It would seem that his story is a bit excessive to be true, but for what I've researched, what he has told me is completely true, and backed up by the stories and information from the other side that rest on the documents I took from Pentex. I believe I will share one more story from his own memories, and then I will wrap this investigation around. Thank you so much for being so patient with me in my research. This will be the last of his own stories that I will share with you here. After this, I will let you all know what I believe important for you all to know regarding the battle to come. Humanity must be saved, and you have no idea how many forces are lining up against us. Every human saved is a possibility for us not to fade into oblivion. For the moment, let him explain himself on his own words, why he chose to fight alongside us and try to save humanity instead of destroying it. Losing a vessel is one of the most awful feelings in the world, especially if the vessel is lost in the fire like the last one. You feel their pain according to how they are dying. I've died. Stabbed, shot, suffocated, crushed, burned, in several vehicle accidents. There are little parts of your own vulnerabilities that get passed on to your vessels. And since fire is one of the main ones for vampires, a vessel dying by fire hurts you a lot. Your energy transports this damage and pain to your unworldly body, and it hurts like hell. When I was expelled because of the death of my vessel and got back to the other side, I still felt a burning sensation on my skin. I had to fight the urge to roll and try to put myself out, as my actual body was not in flames. The burning sensation was awful. I still get shivers when I think about it. I decided to get to work and try to find a suitable vessel for my next life, although it would mean being stuck in the other plane for at least 20 or more years. Well, there was not much more to do. I set my consciousness into the life stream and saw a couple of possible vessels. I decided to choose the possible child of a notable family, as I wanted to get my own kingdom back on Earth. It would work in a vastly different way than I expected, as I would later learn. When I was back on Earth, I was as sneaky and manipulative as I could be. I tried my best to earn everyone's trust and be able to reach my intended goal. I moved the court towards my goal with charm and intimidation when needed. I knew I shouldn't have shown my ruthlessness until my goal was reached, and I was the ruler of this feud. I had it all planned, and by the time I was 20 on Earth, I was close to my goal. But the advisor of the feudal lord discovered my plans and informed him. Since I was the son of one of his noblemen, he casted me out. I was back on square one with no nobility papers. I was just another commoner. I decided the best course of action was to try to gain the trust of different feudal lords, but I needed a different appearance. I thought looking like a sage would be best, even though it would take a long time to accomplish this, around 15 or 20 years. That was nothing for someone measuring his lifetime in hundreds of years, so it was just a matter of waiting it out. I worked on cementing the appearance, so I built a cabin in the forest and started attracting people to give them supernatural advice. It's a good thing that Auspex works well in a vessel. A little aura reading here, a spirit touch there. People started coming to me for advice and removing curses. It was really easy to do, considering that most of this work was just tracking the energy of another special and hunting them down on the other side. I saw this was fun, and decided to make it my lifestyle for a while. About 5 years later, my fame was big enough to get the attention of noble people, and I saw the effort was paying off. But then, about a half a year later, all of it started to wane and fade. I decided to investigate what might be going on, and saw that gypsies had set up a camp less than a kilometer away from me. I was furious. I felt their magic aura, and I knew they were taking my lifestyle away from me by either scaring them off or using their own abilities to get them under their influence. This was not going to pass, so I decided it was time for me to bear my banner again, to destroy their camp and kill them off. Considering that this time I was alone, no army of pirates to fight by my side, I decided to sneak into their camp and kill them in their sleep, setting everyone on fire after the deed was done. Unfortunately for me, Auspex never showed me, or I was never able to read the patterns of, any supernatural protection. When I got into the camp, they started surrounding me, and I was never aware of it until my muscles became rigid. I was trapped and at their mercy. I never got to understand the language of gypsies, but I was scared they would kill me off, as they started shouting all at once, "Vampire, vampire, vampire," over and over. Then I realized I had screwed up. If they knew what I was, even inside a vessel, they would most likely be more powerful than I thought. Then, out of one of the biggest tents around, an old lady came out. Her body looking frail and old, but her aura showed a really powerful being inhabiting this body, most likely a mage. She came all the way up to me, looked at me directly in the eye, and then I passed out. When I woke up, I was sitting in front of a bonfire. I thought, not again, not death by fire again. A shiver ran down my spine, mentally preparing for what was about to come. I started paying attention as I heard multiple mumbling sounds around me, and then the old lady was again in front of me. She told me to my ear, "The death of your vessel is not punishment enough for your sins." And then she moved up front. She started talking out loud, and the whole group started replying to everything she said. "Muerte pentru vampire." My head started feeling woozy. With every chant and reply, this group of people shouted. It felt weird. I had felt my consciousness being pulled towards my vampire body in the other world, not the other way around. I saw myself on both sides, like I was being merged into a single entity. I was even more scared when I saw myself, all of it, sitting in front of the bonfire. There was no longer a vessel. It was me. It was like an astral projection, except this time, I was seeing my actual vampire body there, in front of the bonfire. And my projection looked like the vessel I was inhabiting. I turned around and saw everyone looking at me, no longer chanting. I saw the old lady open my mouth and force feed a liquid inside my body. And then, I felt complete again. I felt like it was just one being, sitting in front of the bonfire. I was unable to move. I was unable to breathe. Although apparently, I didn't need it. But I was no longer furious or fearful. I was anxious. The old lady spoke up again, to everyone. And then, looking at me, she said, "The time has come for you to feel what others have felt under your hand. The time is here for you to be punished." And then, I felt it, like a different kind of astral projection. I was every single one of my victims at the same time. I felt the fear and pain they experienced as I ripped them apart, stabbing them, chopping them, feeding from them. I lived the terror they felt, when they saw me with my sadistic grin looking at them. I pissed myself several times, watching this monster coming at me, relentlessly. I felt the love and admiration Nocturna felt for me when we were together, and I felt the pain in her heart when I despised her and left her for someone way below her status. I felt the weird mix of pleasure the Reapers I killed felt for a moment, when they actually felt something for the first time, followed by the pain running through their bodies while I killed them and tore them apart. I felt the pain and terror Elena felt, watching the love of her life turning into a killing machine, a monster to be removed from Earth. I felt her sadness as I ripped her torso open with my own hands while she was sinking my ship. I felt it all. It was brutal. Never in my life have I felt something like that before, and I just wished I would die, to stop feeling the fear and the anguish, the terror and the sadness. Out of the storm of feelings and screams, and crying and pain, above all of the noise, I heard the voice of the old lady one more time, and I focused on her. I know you're wishing for death, but it will be denied to you. You will have to suffer with the memories of those who fell under your rage and the monstrosities you have shown to be capable of. You will not die until you have redeemed yourself, or you will suffer even more, lost in the memories of those you have wronged, whose lives ended by your hand without justification. I replied, "Do you want me to be some kind of hero to pay for my sins? You're not a hero unless you die. Do you not see that our species feeds off of the wounded ones?" She looked at me with sorrow in her eyes while saying, "You've been drunk with the blood of your victims, and I do feel your pity-wanting pain. But your lust for fame has been a deadly game." "Then let me be who I am," I replied, "and run away with your impeccable kin." She just turned around, saying, "As a descendant of the bloodline of your own mother, let me tell you this. Good wombs have borne bad sons." The weight of the ocean was nothing compared to the weight of my sins. From the first one, after knowing that my own mother had despised who I had become before she died, I cried tears of blood, feeling my heart broken because of my own actions, my mind filled with despair, imagining the pain and infinite sadness my mother should have felt after hearing about my bloodlust. It was too much to handle, too much to bear, even for a remorseless vampire. Remorse was what I was feeling because of all the damage I did to the world, and all the pain and shame this caused to my mother. In my own despair, I passed out. I woke up in my own bed, inside my cabin. My vessel looked malnourished. I was dirty, soiled. I didn't know how many days I had passed out, but it looked like more than 3. I was feverish and woozy. I was way too hungry and thirsty, but above all, I was scared. Was it a bad dream? Why did I keep having these memories flashing in my mind? Why did I feel so sad and hated myself? I cleaned myself and cleaned my cabin while I decided what to do next. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. By nighttime, I decided just to disconnect from my body and return to the other world and see what had happened. When I got to the other side, I just ran a quick check on my otherworldly body and realized I was okay. I felt thirsty, and I decided to go out to hunt, but as soon as I saw humans going about their lives, I felt disgusted by myself. I felt disgusted by my thirst that needed to be sated with blood. I wanted to run away. I wanted to stop living. I went to the Tremere Master to ask him to run a check on me and figure out what was wrong. what was happening to me. I reached his lab and he took me in, feeling immediately what the gypsy shaman had done to me. He took me to a table and sat beside me, looking at me with a worried face. "Carovus, what have they done to you?" he asked, but no words were able to come out of my mouth. He took my head in his hands and started a blood ritual to clean my spirit, but it all came back to me. All the pain, all the feelings. I flinched back, obviously in pain. I talked to him, explaining all the words she said, all the chanting I heard, all the images I saw in my mind, and the feelings I felt. I cried again, as it was becoming unbearable one more time. He told me, "I'm really sorry, Carovus, but there's not much to do. She cursed you by using her own blood, and this is more than a gypsy curse. This is a bloodline curse. She shares your human body inside her, and her descendants will share this curse, unless you accomplish what she asks, or you dispose of your whole bloodline. Your curse won't be over." I asked him, how is it even possible for me to attempt to dispose of my whole bloodline, as I feel remorse just by thinking about feeding from a human? He looked at me, shrugged, and said, "You will have to choose. You can either accept this curse and feed from lower life forms, trying to combat evil," and then he giggled. "And like you were capable of that. Or you can deal with the stabbing pain and do your thing, killing like it's nothing. It's all up to you." I thanked him for his advice, bowing before I left. When I was about to cross the threshold, he said out loud, all the way from the back of his lab, "Think about it. You have learned so much to combat all forms of evil. You have used it for your own personal goals. Think of a way to come to terms with it. Pride is better than pain. You could test yourself with bigger, harder targets to sate your bloodlust. You could balance so much in the world. Back when I was just a mage, I learned that it's all about balance." That got me thinking. I went back to my castle to connect once more to my vessel. I just didn't feel like staying on the other plane any longer, at least for a while. I woke up near noon, and my vessel was feeling a little better. I decided to go out for a walk and clear my mind to take a conscious decision on what I was going to do. I did this every day for at least a year. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to find a way to feed while in a vessel. I started using auspex to see possible ways to feed from energy extracted through my vessel. And after a little while, and many nights feeding from rats and pig's blood, I discovered a way to get energy from people and use it to feed myself. And I also discovered that people in love let their energy flow into the wind freely, so they were easier to spot and feed from. It was way better than hunting, and this allowed me to stay longer in my vessel than usual. After some time, without actually making a choice besides staying in my vessel, I started hearing terrible rumors about a disease that was clearing towns completely. I decided to go out and investigate, and I was in pain again as I saw the sadness and impotence of people losing their loved ones to a plague no one was able to explain. The sadness and pain were slowly becoming harder to bear, as it was moving faster than usual, clearing town after town of people in mere days or weeks. I lost it. I started having these moments where my mind or my vessel skipped some time periods. After a few months of this happening, and finding no explanation, I remember a dream. It was very vivid, like the image of something bound to happen. I didn't recognize the clothing or gestures of people around me in this dream, but I remember the feeling of terror of everyone around me, and my own sadness, seeing humanity dying and fading into oblivion. And then it clicked into place. Without humanity, there would be no more art, and no one else to admire art. Although my writing is not the most artistic in the world, I do admire the great painters and composers and sculptors. I admire the architecture and the way humanity has changed their environments. What I admire the most is the soul of the artist, leaving some of their own self behind with every piece produced. Art is not the word, nor the colors. It's not the sound nor the form. Art is the feeling you experience when you read a story, or the world that you get transported into when you look at a painting. Art is the goosebumps you get when you hear just a couple of notes and they move your soul. And no human beings would mean no new art, no inspiration, and no one to experience what the soul of the artists will leave behind for everyone to feel. I wouldn't need to save humans just because they are humans, as cattle ranchers breed cattle just for the sake of having a steady food supply. I had to help save art. I woke up feeling feverish and sick, and I knew I was infected by the plague. I had written part of my dream as the letter you have read, and I decided to leave it as a reminder of why I needed to fight it. I took a sample of my own blood and placed it in a casing along with the letter, and with the little strength I had left, I went to a mountain and buried it underground, making sure I remembered the location as I would need later on to recover it, in case my resolution was warning. And, up to this point in my life, I had no need to remind myself why I fight the good fight, moving pieces around to give humanity a chance. I have been hurt, and I have had to run away from some battles to give myself another chance. It's better to hear people to say, he fled from a battle here, and live another day to come back with new strategies, than to hear people say, he died here fighting. Choose your battles, as they say. I have learned so much I have been able to defend against and fight entities most of my brethren wouldn't be able to lay a finger on. And I'm still here, fighting to save you, because I love art so much. I would hate to see it become just a memory that fades into infinity. If you thought he was selfless, he is obviously not, in the strictest sense of the word. His actions may be selfless, but his motives are completely selfish. However, he has done more good in the last 600 years than all the bad he did in his past. As long as he is still on our side, and the other specials he has talked to me about, I know we stand a chance against what's coming.